Hold up. I'm hearing some crime sound going on bigger analysis. You know what? We Screwcast, you gotta see what's going on in LA right now.
There are some movies that are designed to scare you, and then there are movies that make you wonder how the filmmakers managed to make any of it look real. Resident Evil is one of them. The new film is not simply another chapter in the franchise. It is a completely new story from filmmaker Zach Cregger, following Brian, a medical courier who suddenly finds himself trapped inside a night of unimaginable chaos. And while audiences have only seen the trailers, those trailers already give us a glimpse into the scale of what is coming. Dark streets, people running for their lives, violence, creatures, bodies falling from above, and a city that appears to be collapsing into complete chaos. But here's the interesting part. What you're seeing on screen is the final result. Before that image ever reaches a cinema screen, hundreds of people have to build it. Actors have to perform it, stunt teams have to choreograph it, special effects artists have to construct it, cinematographers have to light it, visual effects artists have to enhance it, sound designers have to make it frightening, and editors have to put everything together. So today, we're going behind the movie, not to reveal scenes that haven't been released, but to understand how a production like Resident Evil can transform an actor, a camera, a physical set, and visual effects into the nightmare audiences will eventually see on screen. This is how the new Resident Evil is being brought to life. Before we talk about monsters and special effects, we have to understand the world the filmmakers are building. The new Resident Evil comes from director Zach Cregger, the filmmaker behind Barbarian and Weapons. But this isn't simply a remake of one of the existing Resident Evil games. The official description calls it an entirely new story. At the center of that story is Brian, played by Austin Abrams. Brian is a medical courier, and on what should have been an ordinary night, he finds himself caught inside something far bigger than he could have imagined. A normal delivery turns into a fight for survival. And that simple idea gives the filmmakers something extremely important. A character who begins the story as an ordinary person. Because the more ordinary Brian's world feels at the beginning, the more terrifying it becomes when everything around him starts falling apart. And that's where filmmaking becomes important. The audience has to believe that this world exists. The streets have to feel real. The buildings have to feel real. The darkness has to feel real. And most importantly, Brian has to feel like a real person trapped inside it. That means the filmmakers aren't simply creating monsters. They're creating an entire world for those monsters to exist in. A movie set doesn't begin as a movie. It begins as an empty space, a warehouse, a soundstage, a street, a location that doesn't necessarily look anything like the finished film. Then the production team begins building. Walls are constructed, doors are installed, furniture is selected, medical equipment is positioned, vehicles are placed, lights are hidden, rain machines are prepared, smoke is introduced, and suddenly, an ordinary space begins to look like somewhere that shouldn't exist. This is the work of production designers, set decorators, lighting crews, special effects teams, and hundreds of other people working behind the camera. For a horror film, atmosphere is everything. A hallway can't simply be dark. It has to feel like something could be waiting at the other end. A street can't simply be empty. It has to feel abandoned. And a building can't simply look old. It has to look like something terrible happened there. That's why filmmakers use practical details. Damaged walls, old furniture, broken glass, flickering lights, water, smoke, dust, and carefully controlled shadows. Then comes the camera. The cinematographer decides exactly what the audience is allowed to see. Sometimes the camera moves slowly, sometimes it follows the character, and sometimes it stays completely still, because in horror, what the camera doesn't show you can be just as frightening as what it does. Then comes one of the most important parts of a horror production, the people. Before an actor becomes a terrifying, infected character, they may simply be sitting in a makeup chair. No monsters, no chaos, just an actor and a team of makeup artists. But this is where the transformation begins. Prosthetic materials can be applied to the skin, textures can be added, the color of the skin can be changed, eyes can be altered, hair can be transformed, clothing can be distressed, and suddenly, the person sitting in that chair no longer looks like the actor who arrived that morning. They look infected, they look dangerous, they look like they belong inside the world of Resident Evil. And the important thing about practical makeup is that it exists physically in front of the camera. Light hits it, shadows fall across it, the actor can touch it, the camera can move around it, and the audience can believe they're looking at something that actually exists. Of course, modern filmmaking doesn't always choose between practical effects and CGI. Often, it uses both. An actor might wear practical makeup while digital effects enhance the skin. A physical creature might be filmed on set while CGI is used to extend its movement. And sometimes, what appears to be an entirely digital character can begin with something physical. That combination is one of the secrets behind modern horror filmmaking. The creatures are where the imagination of the filmmakers meets technology. A creature can begin as nothing more than a drawing. Then that drawing becomes a sculpture. The sculpture becomes a physical model, and eventually it can become something that moves on camera. Some productions use prosthetics, some use animatronics, some use performers inside creature suits, and some use digital characters created entirely inside computers. But the goal is always the same. The audience should stop thinking about the technology. They should stop thinking about the actor. They should stop thinking about the visual effects. And for a few seconds, they should believe that the creature is actually there. That's much harder than it sounds, because a digital creature isn't convincing simply because it looks detailed. It has to move correctly. Its weight has to feel believable. Its shadows have to match the environment. Its reflections have to make sense. And the lighting on the creature has to match the lighting on the actor. If even one of those things feels wrong, the illusion can disappear immediately. That's why modern productions often combine practical elements with digital effects. A real object gives the camera something physical to capture. CGI can then take that image much further, and when those two worlds are combined correctly, the audience doesn't see the process. They only see the monster. But creatures aren't the only dangerous part of a movie like Resident Evil. The actors themselves have to survive the action. Running, falling, fighting, jumping, being thrown, being chased, and reacting to things that may not even exist yet. That's where stunt coordinators come in. Before the cameras begin rolling, action sequences are carefully rehearsed. The performers learn exactly where they have to move. The camera team learns where to position themselves. The effects team prepares the environment. And safety teams make sure the sequence can be performed without unnecessary risk. What looks like spontaneous chaos on screen can actually be the result of hours or even days of preparation. An actor might run through the same hallway dozens of times. A stunt performer might repeat the same movement until it becomes precise. The camera might capture the sequence from several different angles, and then the editor takes those pieces and creates the illusion that everything happened in one continuous moment. That's one of the great secrets of action filmmaking. The audience sees chaos, the production sees choreography, and this brings us to one of the most interesting details that has emerged about the production. Director Zach Kreger has spoken about wanting practical effects to play an important role in the movie. One particularly dangerous sequence involved bodies falling from rooftops around Austin Abrams' character. According to reporting about the production, the filmmakers used cranes and extremely heavy, body-shaped blood bags for the effect. The idea was to make the moment feel physical, not like something that simply appeared inside a computer, But this is exactly the kind of sequence that shows how complicated filmmaking can become. Imagine the setup. A camera has to be positioned correctly. The actor has to know exactly where to run. The stunt team has to establish the safe path. The crane has to be positioned. The falling object has to be controlled. The timing has to be precise. And everyone has to know exactly what happens when the camera starts rolling. Because when you're working with heavy practical objects above an actor, there is very little room for error. And that is what makes practical filmmaking so impressive. The audience might watch the finished shot for only a few seconds. But behind those few seconds can be hours of preparation. And once the effect happens, it's over. There is no pause button, no undo, no reset. Everything has to work. That's why a shot that looks simple on screen can actually be one of the most complicated shots of the entire production. Horror filmmaking has another advantage. It can create physical effects that the camera can actually capture. Blood, dust, broken objects, damaged clothing, smoke, liquid effects, and practical injuries. These effects don't necessarily have to be created entirely inside a computer. Special effects technicians can build systems that produce the effect directly on set. Hidden tubing can release liquid. Mechanical devices can move objects. Compressed air can create sudden impacts. And specially designed props can break exactly when the director needs them to. Then there's makeup. An actor can arrive looking completely normal and leave the makeup chair looking like they've just survived a nightmare. The camera captures the physical texture. The light interacts with the prosthetics. The actor reacts to the effect, and the result feels connected to the real environment. That physical connection is extremely important in horror, because when the audience believes that something is physically present, the fear becomes easier to accept. But practical effects don't mean that CGI disappears. Instead, modern productions often use practical effects as the foundation and digital effects as the finishing layer. This is where the computer takes over. But CGI isn't simply about creating monsters. Visual effects can be used for almost everything. A background can be extended, a building can become larger, a street can become more dangerous, a creature can be enhanced, an object can be removed, smoke can be added, digital destruction can be created, and an entire environment can be changed. The process usually begins with the footage captured on set. Then visual effects artists track the movement of the camera. They recreate the environment digitally. They build the necessary objects. They add lighting. They create shadows. And eventually, everything is combined. This process is called compositing. One image is placed over another, then another layer is added, and another, until dozens of separate elements become one image. The actor may have been filmed on a real set. The creature may have been created digitally. The background may have been extended. The smoke may have been added later, and the final image may contain elements that were never physically together in the same place. Yet if the work is done properly, you'll never know. And that's the real goal of visual effects. Not to show you the computer, but to make you forget that the computer was ever there. But there's another part of filmmaking that audiences often overlook: sound. Imagine watching a horror scene with the sound completely removed. The image might still be frightening, but it won't feel the same. Now add footsteps, a distant metallic sound, heavy breathing, a door slowly opening, something moving behind the character, a sudden impact, and then silence. The entire scene changes. That's because horror isn't created only with images, it's created with anticipation. Sound designers and Foley artists can recreate everyday sounds specifically for the movie. Footsteps can be recorded separately. Doors can be slammed in controlled environments. Objects can be struck. Different materials can be manipulated to create creature sounds, and voices can be recorded and processed. Then all of those sounds are layered together: dialogue, footsteps, atmosphere, music, impacts, creature noises, silence. And suddenly, The scene feels alive. The audience doesn't consciously analyze any of it. They simply feel tension. That's the power of sound design. Even after the actors finish filming, the movie isn't finished. Not even close. There may be dozens of takes of the same scene. Different camera angles, different performances, different reactions, different versions of the same action. The editor's job is to take all of that material and decide what the audience actually sees. One shot might last 3 seconds, another might last half a second. A character looks left, cut. Something moves, cut. The character runs, cut. Then silence. The editor controls the rhythm, and in horror, rhythm can determine whether a scene feels terrifying or completely ordinary. Too fast, and the audience may not understand what happened. Too slow, and the tension may disappear. The editor has to find the exact moment to reveal information. And sometimes, the most important decision is what not to show. Then comes color grading. The footage is carefully adjusted so that every shot belongs to the same world. The darkness is shaped, skin tones are corrected, highlights are controlled, and the final image receives its cinematic look. Only after all of these stages does the footage begin to resemble the movie audiences will eventually see. And this is where everything finally comes together. An actor begins on a set. The production team builds the environment around them. The cinematographer controls the camera and lighting. The stunt team creates the movement. Special effects artists create physical elements. Visual effects artists build what cannot be captured practically. Sound designers create the atmosphere. Editors assemble the footage. Colorists create the final look. And then the audience sees one image, one moment, one scene. It might only last a few seconds, but hidden inside that moment can be the work of hundreds of people. That's what makes filmmaking so fascinating. The finished movie can make everything look effortless. A character runs through a collapsing building. A creature appears from darkness. Something falls from the sky. An entire city seems to descend into chaos. But behind every one of those moments is a carefully controlled production. And because Resident Evil hasn't reached cinemas yet, we're still only seeing pieces of that process. The trailers give us glimpses. The official story gives us the foundation. And the production information gives us clues about how the filmmakers are approaching the movie. The complete picture will only become clearer when the film finally reaches audiences. So the next time you watch the Resident Evil trailer, don't only look at what is happening in front of the camera. Look behind it. Look at the lighting. Look at the environment. Look at the movement. Look at the creatures. Look at the practical effects. Look at the moments that appear impossible. Because every one of those images had to be created. Someone designed it. Someone built it. Someone performed it. Someone filmed it. Someone edited it. And someone eventually turned all of those pieces into the movie we're waiting to see. Resident Evil arrives in cinemas on September 18th, 2026. And until then, we're only seeing the beginning. The real story is what happened behind the camera. This is Big L Analysis, and this is how movies are made.